This is a yelling podcast. From poking at you to plans and everything in between, this is Magnified Pod, the only podcast that discusses culture, religion, politics, and the entire discography of everyone's favorite left coast punks, MxPx. And we're back. John, today we have a very special guest. On the pod, we have Daniel Leary of MxPx memes fame, the meme master himself, or not MxPx memes if you want to get your punk rock memes that are not in the MxPx vein. Mm-hmm. You can find him there on Instagram or on Twitter. And Daniel is his real world name, and we're happy to have him on the pod. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
So, first, we want to talk about the memes. We can get into the history of you and when you discovered the band, but I first want to, because that is how I first came into contact with you, was seeing the memes. Mm-hmm. So before you started doing any of the MxPx memes, was this something that you were doing for fun?
For other stuff?
Doing for other stuff? But how did you start doing the MxPx memes?
Well, as far as like doing memes before this account, like I really didn't do much of anything in that. There was lots of like fits and starts over the years, and like I have like abandoned Tumblr pages that won't be spoken of and stuff like that. Just things I like lost interest in.
Sure. Because
I didn't have a driving force for it. And then as far as liking memes, it was just, I was just like anybody else, just like something goes viral and it's a Twitter moment, and now I know that it's a meme that's out there in the world, or I kind of see people reposting it. But it's really because of MxPx memes that I like constantly trying to figure out trending memes and things that I can use for the band. But yeah, it was really just this was sort of an anomalous thing in my life. Like I kind of, like a year ago, I kind of thought to myself it would be fun to have a meme page that was dedicated specifically to one band. And I didn't know at that moment it was going to be MxPx, but that's what it ended up becoming. So yeah. And now I'm like more a fan of MxPx because of this account. And I'm also more entrenched in meme culture, or at least more aware of it. Mm-hmm. And more aware of things that happen, in that world, that community, or whatever.
So the meme community.
The meme, yeah. It is. The meme community is something I've looked into now, and it's something I don't really want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Because it's
what have you discovered? What dark paths have you gone down?
A lot of Pepes out there.
It's basically like the bastard child of the bastard child of 4chan. Like that's really what meme culture is. Like that's where memes more or less began, right? So
right.
Like, you start looking into like, places where memes begin nowadays, and I'm like, I'll just stick to Instagram and try to find people who are, up on the latest trends there. And then even doing that, sometimes I still find like upsetting shit, like, like there's one thing when it's like racist memes or something, but then sometimes it's like actually like disturbing, like upsetting stuff.
Yeah, that's also probably something that MxPx wouldn't want associated with the band anyway.
Probably not.
So I don't think Mike would appreciate you posting some spicy Pepe MxPx memes.
Follow up, how great did it feel when he clearly was thinking mainly of you on the latest podcast stuff when he was talking about all the additional MxPx content out there?
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. I actually, so if anyone hasn't heard it, Mike was on his podcast and he's talking about, and he says about all how like the community online has started to really, bounce back like it used to be years ago. And he says, but back then there wasn't all the, and then he stops and says additional content or additional fan content. I'm like, he was about to say memes.
I think he was going to say magnified podcasts, but that's fine. He might have said memes.
And then he mentioned memes, and I guess he's thinking about me, but also now like like there was one other MxPx memes account before me. I think he was actually just a couple weeks or a month or two before me.
Huh.
And his name's Josh, and I've actually met him in real life. Like he's way younger than me. He's like just in college now.
Okay.
And sometimes I felt bad that I like stole his thunder, but I didn't know about his account when I started mine. So now I've met him in real life, so it's not like there's no beef. There's no like secret beef.
No, see,
yeah.
this is what, I mean, John and I have alluded to this in the past. Like, you know, there need be not any MxPX related beefs in terms of content. Like, we're all out here trying to generate content from a band that's important to us, not because we need to start a flame war, which is probably a term that hasn't been used since like 2003. But so I need to say this on the record, because for people, I would like there to be some sort of study about people who do memes, because the way your brain works, you are so quick. And it actually legitimately impresses me how quick and sharp you are, and how you can generate new content so quickly off of new MxPX stuff. What is your and we'll get into the music and other stuff later, but I'm genuinely interested in how your brain works, and how do you have like a reservoir of stuff that you want to memify, or do you feel inspired when you see something new and you're like, oh, I'll just dig into the recesses, and or do you go based off a new meme template that you're seeing?
I pretty much, well, thank you first of all, but I pretty much go off of any direction that I can think of something. And I started this back in November, and I only had a handful of ideas when I started out. And originally I thought I'd be out of ideas by like 2 months, pretty much. And it's just all started to kind of snowball. And I'm not saying I won't ever run out of ideas, but it's like,
well, as long as there are new memes, you won't, because
exactly.
the life cycle of a meme, or it's really short.
Yeah.
You know, John and I were actually joking before we started this call with you. You know, we were just sort of joking. We were calling you Damn Daniel. And like that meme seems positively ancient at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
But so
it's only like 2 years old or something.
Not even. Is it that old?
I think it might be about 2 years, but yeah, I remember that. Luckily, that's only like maybe the third time in my life someone has referenced that directly to me, and so that's good. That didn't become like a major ongoing theme in my life. And maybe if I was younger, maybe if I was actually the age of kids who really look at memes, it would be a problem. But one thing that's kind of that, as far as my philosophy with this account, is like, I can jump on a trending meme and try to figure out the MxPx connection, whether that's like connecting it to some cover art or connecting it to lyrics or some other sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But if there's what they call now a dead meme, that's like when Ugandan Knuckles suddenly takes over the internet, and then everyone's completely over it like 2 days later.
Right.
That's like now a dead meme. I can wait a couple of weeks and then just pop. I feel like since it's MxPX specific, like people are really looking for the MxPX angle to it. They're not too concerned with whether or not it's like a hot trending meme.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I'm not. Yeah. So I specifically have also gone back and tried to find like every previous pop meme and tried to come up with the MxPX version of that. And to answer your question earlier, like sometimes I start with a song, or I start with an album, or I start with some like picture of the band, or like looking at a cover art, and I'm like, how can I just like do something funny and weird with this? And sometimes I search around looking for something, and sometimes an idea immediately clicks. And I recently tweeted that I realized I've given myself MxPX apophenia, where you like see patterns and things like that. So I'm like, so now I just see something and I'm like, how does that connect to MxPX? And that's pretty much how it, I've trained my brain now.
That's how you know you're really deep into it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I just free associate like just walking down the road and seeing things and like
You're cruising down Chico Way and you're
cruising down the cold streets and I figure out
that's a better reference for this album.
Did you get to meet Mike at the show in LA?
Yes.
Cool.
I met them. I went to both shows,
okay.
And I met them at the very end of the night when they were doing the signing table in the lobby, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to say on MxPx memes. It's gonna be so embarrassing. And luckily, the people who were in front of me were still having their time with like Mike and Yuri and Chris, and Tom was kind of at the other end of the table, and I'm standing next to him, and I'm just kind of like standing there awkwardly, like I'm at a party, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do this. And I turn to Tom, and I'm like, hey, you seen that MxPx memes thing, right? That's me, and I know Tom has seen it because he's like the most on Instagram, so I felt relatively safe to tell him, and then he was like, hey, everybody, and he immediately turned to the rest of the band. He's like, no, seriously, look over here, guys, look over here. And I'm like, oh my God.
That's the best. I mean, that's the reception that you want.
Well, but also that video of Mike apologizing to your wife.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Sorry about your husband's obsession with me and the band.
That was so great. That was the next night. That was in Hollywood after the Orange County show. So I'd already met them, and he knew what I looked like at that point. So that's when, and then we got there like not late, but we ended up at the back of the line to get in, and he comes around the corner because he's going to play for the line, except we're around the other corner, so we didn't actually get to hear him play. If you've seen any of those videos online.
Yeah, I did.
And so I got my phone out immediately because I'm like, oh, I just definitely got to film this. And then he's like, hey, and he recognized me, and he shakes my wife's hand and says, sorry for your husband's obsession. It was great. It was like the best tweet it was the best received tweet I've ever had.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because Twitter's only so much interaction with people on Twitter. I think Instagram generally as like a thing. Yep. I've learned this from these accounts is like Instagram, I'll get hundreds of followers and tons of likes, but then, a tweet only gets like, double digits if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
But that tweet got a huge response.
Yeah, when we started the pod, like we were recording episodes before we actually launched them, and so we hadn't started our accounts, but like we kept saying, follow us on Twitter and hit us up on Twitter, and like we have
70 something followers on Twitter, and
so
we're closing in on 300 for.
That's really just Twitter.
Yeah. It's weird. It's to try and understand the kind of people that lean Instagram versus Twitter. It's something that I'm as a young social media podcast, I don't understand, but that's not what we're talking about. So, Daniel, can you share with us your first MxPx experience, or to bite from our mutual love for Scott and Scott of You Talking You to Me on Are You Talking Ari Emery Me? When did you first hear of MxPx?
That is an excellent question, and I would like to answer that by explaining that my MxPx first experience, I'm finding out just from these accounts, and not just from maybe someone said this. Wait, you've only had one guest. I'm totally flummoxing myself here. Okay, I've heard this from multiple. Oh, it was Rich's podcast.
Okay.
So the Poconacha podcast.
Yeah.
Like, I'm finding out that tons of people have had this exact same experience where it was basically like my parents didn't want me listening to so much cursing music.
Right.
And my parents weren't actually. So we were raised in a Christian household, but my parents
don't play the new record for him.
I know. Well,
explicit.
My parents weren't like super strict when it came to media. Mm-hmm. Like they weren't even like, we were really sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, but we were like
Christmas, Easter Christians.
Yeah, well, we went every Sunday, but it just wasn't like it wasn't like the absolute theme of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
That actually happened later in my parents' lives. That happened like around the 2000s and stuff like that.
Mm.
But my mom still didn't like me listening to so much swearing music, but she didn't take my CDs away. The only CDs she ever took away from me were Adam Sandler's "They're All Gonna Laugh at You."
Nice.
And I should have said that one second, because the other one was Nine Inch Nails' Broken EP. So those are the only two she ever took away from me.
Man.
And then she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna take you to the Christian bookstore, and they have music that sounds exactly like the music you want. You just got to talk to the lady there, and she'll guide you towards it." And
the lady at the Christian bookstore, huge MxPx fan.
She had a big mohawk, right?
Well, yeah.
She definitely wasn't wearing a denim skirt, right?
No, she was not. She was like a grandma. She was like gray hair. I mean, I remember her as a grandma, but I was like, what, 12 or something?
Yeah, right.
So
she was probably like 41.
Exactly.
Mike's age.
I imagine
Ooh, shit.
Yeah, like people just age so much slower now. So she could have been 40, and she could have looked like a grandma back then. I don't, but she actually called them MxPx. I was like, I want to look into this. I want to look into this band. She's like, oh, MxPx, okay. And I don't think we left that day with Teenage Politics, but I think we left with the "I'm Your Biggest Fan" comp. Because I think we went to the Christian bookstore, and it was really close to our house, so we could go back anytime. And she was like, "Oh, if you're not sure what bands you want, you should buy this." And she hands me the "I'm Your Biggest Fan" comp, which is sort of like the proto version of Songs from the Penalty Box.
Right. Yeah.
And the gimmick was that like you are actually supposed to write fan letters to the bands, because they put their addresses and in the liner notes for the whole comp. And I never did write to anybody, but I don't remember what was on. Oh, darn.
I'm looking it up right now to see if I can. Yeah, that cover looks super familiar.
Yeah. And the Cooties have a really rare song on that's not on the album, called "Too Late." That's an amazing song, but I don't know why it wasn't on the album. And as far as I know, that was never printed anywhere else. And it's
Lifetime
only on the
Enlightenment by MxPx,
there you go,
which is the intro song to our podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, there are Blaster the Rocket Boy, Special Guest. These are shorthanded. These are some like deep cut, tooth and nail. I mean, of course they got some Goatee Hook. I was a huge Goatee Hook fan. Got some Crux on there. Yeah, this is that was the first album you went home with. So would Lifetime Enlightenment have been your very first introduction to MxPx?
Yeah, I think it was.
All 1 minute and 7 seconds of it.
I know. And it wasn't. I don't know if the song itself said this. This is the. I don't think it was the song itself. I think it was also one of those Diamante comparison charts.
Did that come with the album?
No, it wasn't in the album, but they gave me one on their way out the door at the Christian bookstore. So I remember, and it said Green Day. And here's the thing: is like,
yes. Do you still have that for?
No, I don't have that.
I'm so desperately wanting to get a hold of a physical copy of the Diamante comparison chart.
Yeah.
Because John and I both had it. I don't know what happened to it, but I believe I kept it in my wallet for a period of time.
I think I did have one on me for a little while as well. Because I also had a piece of paper for buying all my records, because I'd go to a record store, and whether it was Christian or not, pop punk records that I wouldn't necessarily bring to mind. I didn't have a phone in my pocket to remind me, no Discogs list to remind me what am I looking for. So I had I had that in my pocket for a while, and I had my piece of paper reminding me what do I want to buy at the record store. And I think they were around for a while, because I remember one at least as late as the early 2000s, like 2002, they were still printing them.
Yeah, we talked with Jason a little bit about it on that pod, but I don't remember where we ended up.
Oh, that's right. You had two guests. I'm your third guest. Okay. Mm-hmm. I forgot that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Not to say we don't rank any of the guests of importance. Let's be honest, in terms of MxPx fame, you're a huge get. So then you had the I'm Your Biggest Fan mix. What was the MxPx album that you ultimately went back to purchase? What was your first MxPx album?
It was Teenage Politics because
Damn
I
right.
actually, yeah, I don't remember what it is right now. I'd have to Google it again, but whatever the release date is for Life in General, I bought my copy of my mom bought me my copy of Teenage Politics that month. Because it was just this perfect situation where I realized I want to check out MxPx because it says they sound like Green Day and I like the song in this comp, and which they never sounded like Green Day.
No, of course not. It's the most absurd thing in the world.
It's just like this is the thing that's making children fall is Green Day, so we need to find the version that's gonna keep them close to God or whatever. So I went back and got Teenage Politics, and then like less than a month later, I went back by myself, and I think I might have spent my own money to get
Life in General.
Life in General, yeah. And then I figured out pretty soon that MxPx was also at the regular record store, so I was, I didn't just have to go to the Christian bookstore for that stuff. I lived in Burlington, Massachusetts, and in the 90s, we had it's a relatively small town. It's like a medium-sized town with a mall, but we had no less than like 8 record stores in the 90s, and it was amazing. And I could ride my bike to almost all of them. It was pretty amazing.
Such a great life.
I bought a bunch of my Christian records at a Christian bookstore, but as I had stated in previous pods, my first MxPx album was purchased at a Best Buy, so it wasn't. I don't think I ever operated under the assumption that I could only get them at a Christian bookstore, but
right.
So that would have been 96 then, because that late 96 was when Life in General came out. So you would have snagged both Teenage Politics and Life in General in 96. So from that point forward, was it a love affair, an immediate connection with the band?
Yeah, for sure. It was like, because looking back in my life, MxPx was more than just like my favorite punk band, and I've had multiple favorite bands. Like throughout my whole life, like MxPx might just be one of my favorite bands, but I realized that they're probably the most important. They're one of the 2 most important bands in my life in terms of trajectory of my like musical taste. The first would be They Might Be Giants.
Oh,
because
interesting.
They were the first band that showed me that there's like, legitimate music that's not just Disney tapes or like soundtracks to things. There's actual rock bands that actually, that tour on the road and stuff. Like, because my parents, even though they didn't have a problem with me getting secular music, later on, they did block MTV from our house. So I actually didn't have a lot of pop music in my life for a certain amount of time, and then They Might Be Giants was the first one.
Was Tiny Toons your entry point to them? Me too.
It absolutely was.
So good.
And They Might Be Giants is an example of music and a band that injected fun and humor and levity into their music, and especially at a time in the 90s when there was a lot of, and we'll get into the sort of the negativity and cynicism of Panic, but I mean, that was pretty rampant throughout the 90s as well. So, but to have something like They Might Be Giants, which was just fun and just the vocals were, one of my karaoke go-tos is Birdhouse in Your Soul.
Ooh, so good.
That is a solid jam, and I defy anybody to tell me otherwise.
No, I won't. Have you seen, the Tonight Show footage when they performed that live with the Johnny Carson band? Have you seen that?
No.
It is amazing. That you go when we're done, you have to go to YouTube
Yeah.
and check that out because it's incredible. And they like I don't know the name of the band leader for the Johnny Carson show, but he like kind of rearranged the song just a little bit for the horn section, and it's like the greatest thing. And it's super. They actually played it way faster in the documentary, in the gigantic documentary.
Okay.
They talk about it, and maybe in the special features, they talk about that night and how they accidentally counted it in too fast. So they're playing it like, just a little too fast, but it's amazing.
That's
So-
awesome.
Yeah.
Doc Severinsen, FYI.
So
yes, that's right. Doc Simmons.
So okay, this is a sort of going backwards a little bit. You know, we talked about sort of our entry point. You said your entry point to They Might Be Giants was Tiny Toons. I think mine actually might have been Weird Al, because
Right.
Oh, yeah.
he did a style parody of They Might Be Giants on Bad
Right.
Hair Day with Everything You Know Was Wrong. So that was done in the style of an They Might Be Giants song, and I think probably I don't remember when I first was like legitimately introduced to They Might Be Giants, but I think that style of music is so distinct, They Might Be Giants, that it's pretty, now when you listen to that song by Weird Al, you're like, oh, obviously.
It's the saxophone section in the middle that really nails it home. Like if they took that out, maybe you'd be like, this is sort of They Might Be Giants, but once that gets to that bridge, what would it be, a solo, a bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not very shy on Magnified Pod that we carry a torch pretty hard for Weird Al, but so it really warms the cockles of my heart to know that you're like referencing an Al original song with the bridge, and you're like, oh, this is clearly I love it.
Well, there's another Al original on that album that ties into the MxPx album we're talking about today,
Ooh.
unless I'm mistaken.
which
Both these albums have songs about calling in sick, right?
that is true.
Yeah.
That is true. Weird Al does have. Yeah, he's calling in sick today. Ain't going to work, no way.
Yeah.
That is.
As I was saying it, I'm like, this isn't on Poodle Hat, right? Like I'm not.
Nope. No, this you are 100% right. It is on Bad Hair Day.
Yeah. So
Keep going.
so just while we're thinking about, like, I'm thinking about 90s and Weird Al and Bad Hair Day. The thing about MxPx is, like, I was already pretty well into like grunge music. So we finally got MTV in our house when they switched out our cable box, and my parents, like, we were old enough and my parents were also too lazy to like call the cable company and have them block MTV. Because I guess back then it was like a literal blocking in the cable box, not just a phone, not just a switch on the cable company's end. So I finally get MTV, and I'm getting into Nirvana. I'm getting into like the Toadies and Silverchair and like all these grunge bands, and I liked it pretty well, but I always kind of had a feeling like, there was something lacking. Like it was the greatest thing I'd ever heard at that point. But then when I discovered MxPx, that's how I found out that like punk music was actually like a living, breathing scene that still existed. Like because of MTV and because of grunge music, I was under the impression that punk music was a thing that had existed at one point,
Sure.
and then got folded into other sounds, and that there might be a Green Day and a Rancid and stuff like that, and Bad Religion had the Gray Race at that point. I thought that those were sort of like either not, their sound was sort of a novelty, or they were bands that had existed, for a while, like Bad Religion. So I didn't think that there was, hundreds of new pop punk bands in the world. I didn't know that, Warped Tour was just starting to happen around that time. So it was MxPx that actually opened that door for me, that I discovered, from the liner notes, all the bands they thanked and stuff like that.
Right.
And then
Blink 187.
Exactly. And then because then MxPx leads me directly into Blink 182, which is also like an obsession in my life. Blink 187.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Familiar with them.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, so if my mom's plan to get me away from cursing music
Yeah.
actually just led me into a different like version of cursing music.
Right.
You might say the whole enterprise of the Christian bookstore alternate universe was a folly to begin with, but
Yeah.
anyway.
So little did your mom know that Mike was subversive as hell, and he was like
know.
slipping in all these, and they would eventually go on tour with Blink and Bad Religion and all of these
Right.
bands that your mom was like, no. So
Just to defend my mom, she was, like I said, she wasn't the most strict with media. Like we
Sure.
were allowed a certain amount of freedom that a lot of kids I hear, a lot of people my age who when they were kids they weren't. So
no, and
I was kind of
no, we're not busting
No,
bus
I know.
tossing Mrs. Leary over here, but like my parents by no means were like, you're not allowed to listen to this music, but I took it upon myself to self-select like what was more Christian to listen to. So
yeah.
it's
I had a period where I did that as well.
isn't it so sad to think like I voluntarily gave up Operation Ivy and Suicide Machines and all of these bands that was like it still breaks my heart to think about high school Andrew trying to like be a better Christian by sacrificing these amazing influential punk bands.
I mean, I my thing that happened with that was like I sold off all my previous MTV grunge CDs, and I did that and I would be lying if I didn't say I did that for God, right? Like I was like, God wants me to get rid of these CDs, but really it was a bit of a sham, because really those CDs I had run out of interest in, and I didn't get rid of any of my like Epitaph or Fat Wreck CDs.
Because
I did get rid of
Fat Records and Epitaph were not releasing garbage. They were releasing some of the best punk rock in the 90s.
Right. I think I did get rid of like a NoFX CD or something, because I'm like, this is too much of an affront. But then I just got all those back. But I didn't bother going back and getting a lot of my early free MxPx music.
Well, good thing. Fat Mike has really cleaned up his act since then.
Yeah.
It's fine. I remember like
He's a model citizen now.
telling my buddy in high school like how good Heavy Petting Zoo was, and he was just like, I just can't, like the cover I don't like it.
Yeah.
Couldn't get
I didn't
past
buy
it.
that one because of the cover. Like, I mean, I don't even.
Good record.
Eventually, Napster came out, so I'm like, okay, good. I can. That's how I'll get this record. I don't think I knew what Heavy Petting was, so I don't think that that
So
went right
sheltered.
over my head.
We were so sheltered.
Quick sidebar.
Yes.
Talking about my mom and not being too sheltered, but a little bit sheltered. My mom knew I was getting. Then we'll touch on this if I talk about what I was doing in 2005. But my mom knew I wanted to be like in film, a filmmaker someday. And this is like 1994, 1995 when I'm starting to get that aspiration. And she's like, "Oh, we should watch more movies, and we'll rent them and stuff." And it's like, "Oh, well, let's get this movie that apparently a guy shot all by himself. Like this is something maybe you could do someday. Shoot your own movie,
Clerks.
with your camera." Yep.
Oh my God! Really?
Whoops.
Did you watch this? Did you watch Clerks with your mom?
No, because like it pretty quickly became apparent to my mom that this was not a movie she could watch with me. However, at the time, because it's really all language, it's like they almost got an X rating just for language, right? And all of that went right over my head. Like when they're talking about, snowballing and stuff like that.
Well,
I'm like,
I mean,
have no idea what he's talking about.
I mean, it was Clerks where the mom and her daughter go into the adult video store, or like the video store, and he orders all those.
Oh, right, yeah.
I was just thinking
I
about
don't even
this.
think we got to that scene. I think it was earlier scenes that they were already talking about stuff that was so intense, and it was a foreign language to me.
Sure.
I didn't get it, and my mom was freaked out, so she immediately turned it off. And I'm like, oh, I think I went back and I saw it myself from like a friend or something, like maybe less than a year later, and I still didn't pick up on most of this sexually explicit talk. Like I just, that was something I understood later.
We were talking about Clerks.
Maybe
Oh, yeah.
maybe we use this moment to skip ahead.
Yep. Okay, so
Yeah, sorry I took
from
so many sidebars talking about,
right.
yeah.
So
What
from
happens?
from coming in socks to Panic.
Oh boy.
So Daniel Leary, what was going on with you in 2005?
Well, in 2005, like I mentioned, that's when I finally went to film school.
Okay.
Like so I grew up in Massachusetts, and I wanted to go to film school, and I actually took off a couple years in between high school and figuring out where I wanted to go. So I think I'm like pretty much the same age as you guys. I think I'm actually 1 year older than one of you. I think you
Okay.
mentioned your birthdays last week.
I'm 35. He's 34.
Oh, okay, so I'm 36.
Got it.
Okay.
So I graduated in 2001, and then I took 4 years off with like community college classes and like working and like trying to figure out where I wanted to go. And like eventually I figured out there's a film school in Florida. So that's what in 2005, you know, and the time in between that was like 100% filled with like movies and punk shows. Like that's all I did from like 2001 to the summer of 2005 was like
Sounds familiar.
go to punk shows in the New England area, ska shows, tons of ska shows, and like go to movies and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it was like, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt the flow here, but I just need to know if you were to choose your top three most, doesn't need to be your favorite, but the top three movies that you've watched the most. As a film student, what are some of like the three most important movies or movies that you've watched the most in your life?
One like I really love Terry Gilliam's Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
It started to age for me a little bit. Like it's not as mind expanding as I used to think it was. Sorry, you really put me on the spot.
No, it's
Brazil's pretty good. I feel like you're good with that.
And,
something that you just like. You can put it on, and no matter what it is, it doesn't need to be like heady or like some
or
art
impressive.
or art house thing. But like for me, like Back to the Future will always be funny and almost arguably one of the most perfect movies that in almost every way that can be written. But it's just so funny and creative and well done.
And it's like just incredibly tight, and they worked on it.
Yep.
Like if you look into like their first drafts and stuff, it wasn't first thought, best thought. It was like, let's really work on this, and they made it perfect.
Yeah, because
I
at
probably
first
feel
it was
the same
like
way.
it was like a refrigerator, like
Right.
not a DeLorean, but so yeah, that's like the way a craft is done. You hone it, you work on it, you figure it out, and yeah, like I think it's almost quintessentially in my mind like almost a perfect movie. But
Yeah.
anyway, we don't need to.
I think I feel the same way about Toy Story, about the first two Toy Story movies. And
Not a fan of the third?
I am a fan of the third. I do think it's just like it's like a little. It's so heavy-handed in the end.
Sure.
That's my only problem. It's amazing. That final scene in the incinerator is it's amazing. But then when I step away from it, I'm like, that was just there's definitely something they wrote it. It's almost written perfectly, but it's almost written too perfectly. It's like it's just so heavy-handed, and the message of facing your own death. It's like that's not. There's enough of that in Toy Story 2 where it's like, eventually Andy will be tired of you and stuff. And it's like, it's good. It's nice to see that actually happen. Like Andy does get tired of them, but it's just like so heavy. It's like the Lars von Trier Pixar movie.
So back to 2005.
Yes.
You were film school.
Yeah.
Where were you with that? Where were you with music at that point?
And see, this is the thing is like I spent all my years between high school and film school constantly obsessed with music and movies. But then when I went to film school, I pretty much didn't drop music, but I let that take a back seat. And I went to a couple shows in Florida, but I was like, just having moved states, I automatically kind of didn't have my finger on the pulse of, what places to go to and what bands to check out, what like local bands. Like I had favorite local bands back home, but I didn't have that any longer in Florida. And I kind of, like some of my favorite bands came through and I would check them out, but I had limited funds at that point. So I just let music sort of fall to the back seat and I focused totally on movies. And by the time I graduated, and music remained, like I still had my CDs and I eventually got an iPod and all that. But I pretty much just like, at that point I solidified, like going to college, going to film school, pretty much just, that was like the point that I think a lot of people reach where it's like, you've got all the music you need. And maybe you get past that, but I think this happens for a lot of people. It's like, I've learned all these bands, I've learned all this music, I have all these songs and records, and now I can kind of stop here and not really look for new bands and look for new records and not necessarily follow up on bands I already love, but just sort of let the nostalgia start to grow and start to only enjoy what you've had experiences with in the past. And that's the point that I got to with music. So with MxPx, even though they were such an incredibly important band to me, and they were one of, if not my most favorite, at that point, I lost track of them. Like I spent years and years like constantly looking at the website and reading interviews and figuring out what the band was up to and buying records the day they came out. But Panic came out right when I started college, so I was really focused on that. So I didn't even know Panic came out for a couple of years after it came out. So that's sort of, and now, like 10 years on, having graduated, I'm starting to, actually it's moving to California. I moved to California in 2014, and that sort of reignited my passion for music, and having it sort of be equal to film is like, now I'm checking out new bands that are in Los Angeles. I'm seeing all these bands from like Tooth and Nail and like Christian pop punk bands that broke up before I ever got to see them. And, like I never got to see Dogwood, but now I've seen them twice here since they reunited.
Wow.
Who else have seen? And a lot of these bands only have come back together because of MxPx.
Well, you were at the Slick Shoes show.
Right. I think I've seen Slick Shoes 2 or 3 times now. I've definitely seen them twice. They opened for MxPx on this one of these last LA shows, and then they played for them at the live album recording at the Left Coast Live album.
We're pushing for that 90-pound wuss reunion.
I know, right?
That was my second.
That was my second Tooth and Nail record.
Yeah.
That's what I went back and got after, or my third. I don't know if it was between. Maybe I got Teenage Politics and the 90-pound wuss record at the same time, or maybe I got it after Life in General. But it was those 3 that were my first ones.
Yeah, I somehow came by that Kick You Hard 7-inch record at some point. I don't know. To this day, I have no idea how I have it in my possession, but for some reason I do, because I didn't even own the
A record player?
No, I didn't. When I owned it, I didn't even own any other 90-pound wuss records or like albums, but I had that Kick You Hard record. So when Panic came out, it sort of passed you by.
Yeah.
So when did you come to it then? When did you first hear it?
I think I definitely heard it a little bit here and there in those couple of years in between, going to college and going to see the second Left Coast Live show. I definitely heard some of those songs, and I probably downloaded the MP3s, but I don't know if I even bought a copy until later. But it was really like doing MxPx memes where I deep dived into the album.
Sure.
So I can't really say where did I finally listen to Panic. I again, Secret Weapon can also almost pass me by, right? Like I don't think I bought that. I remember where I bought that. That had been out for a year or two, maybe 2011. I bought that, and so then maybe I bought Panic around the same time, but I just didn't really play them that much. And it's nothing against MxPx because now I know. It's almost like you love somebody passionately, and then like they leave your life for a little bit, and then eventually you come back. It's almost like the Notebook. My relationship with MxPx is like the Notebook. I just hope I'm not the one who, ends up in the hospital and can't remember anything.
I'm picturing a meme in my head here.
Of you,
My face on
you laying in bed with a superimposed face of Mike.
I imagined like the
That might be
wet, rainy holding up in the air.
Of the poking at your punk head.
Yes. You're welcome for that idea, Daniel, and please do it.
Okay, I'm adding it to my list right now.
Do you have a meme list?
I do, because I get so many ideas now and some of them I can do quickly on my phone. I can use like the image flip website, and some, I can use sometimes I make memes in Twitter, or I make memes in Instagram stories, but other ones like I want to give proper attention to, so I need to do them on Photoshop. So I need to carve out some time in my life to sit down at my computer, and that's not as easy. So and make these things. So I have a list of memes, and I have a number of them done and ready to go. Like I have more. Like if I stopped trying to make memes, I'd probably last another couple of months just off of stuff. Oh, and I have not even called out Rich Nelson up to this point, the host of the Poking Out podcast. Like he just sends me stuff all the time.
That's awesome.
Like he was already also kind of into memes and making MxPx related content and stuff. And he used to be the fan club president,
Right.
before PX Chris was.
Right.
So it's like he has all this information about the band and stuff, and he has like pictures of them and stuff, and he that he took at the time, and he was making memes, and now it's pretty much like it's basically 50. My account is 50% Rich's at this point, and he kind of imposed himself on it, which I'm totally cool with, because he just started sending me ideas and sending me more ideas, and then we have like a DM going where we're discussing ideas and stuff. So
That's funny.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of Rich Nelson and Panic, I mean, he's in the liner notes for this album, which I didn't notice until right before we started recording this podcast. I was looking through the liner notes. I was like, wait a second, Rich Nelson, MxPx fan club. So yeah, that's bananas.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, I knew that he had some sort of connection with the band, but this is part of the MxPx community. Everybody's connected some random way, it seems.
Yeah, when he started popping up in my life on Instagram, sending me messages and stuff, I was like, this guy knows the band somehow, right? Like he was sending me, he didn't tell me who he was, and I didn't know who he was, because I wasn't even in the fan club until last year. Like I never knew. I mean, even going back to when I was a huge MxPx fan, I didn't know there was a fan club.
Me neither. That was not something I was aware of.
And I guess, I didn't know about it. And I feel bad because then other super fans who the band knows personally would pop in before I was now I'm kind of known. Now people kind of know who I am. But before that was the case, people would DM me and be like, who is this? Like they expected it to be someone from they either expected me to be Rich, or they expected me to be somebody, from the message boards back in the day. And I just didn't really do any of that stuff. So I'm always letting them down. I'm like, I'm just a dude.
Yeah. Social media has become the great leveler where we're all just able to do it. I think I had a really similar experience with Panic, in that I did not know these last 3 records before the new one really at all until we started doing the podcast. And Panic is now easily in my top 5 MxPx records. So I mean, do you want to get into maybe your top 3 songs from the record? Stuff that you like the most from it?
I just realized I hadn't put that list together.
Well, it doesn't have to be that literal if you don't want, but.
So the thing is, I never really did a proper dive into Panic, Secret Weapon, or Plans Within Plans. I actually, for some reason, just because it was on the cover too, and maybe it was a nostalgic thing, when that came out, I had that the day it came out. I was listening to that all the time. But for some reason, their actual proper original songs I wasn't listening to for, really listening to for 10 years. And even when I went to Left Coast Live and they played songs that, were from these albums, like I knew the songs a little bit, but they weren't really like 100% clicking. But so to me, they were kind of new songs, but kind of not. I was just in that kind of weird gray area. So now going back and just trying to make memes and thinking like I need to know every song really well. And that's part of the reason why I picked MxPx, because I was like, I don't really have any total blind spots with them. It's like if I pick some other bands, like if I pick They Might Be Giants, like there was a point where I knew 100 to do memes for. There was a point where I knew 100% of their music. Now I probably know like 80% of their music. So there's certain albums I'd kind of have to start from square one and like really listen to figure out, how will I get this in my head and have it ready in my mind. But really it was just these 3 albums I had to like suddenly cram, right? So, and then I realized Panic is like probably my favorite album. I'm against the idea of really ranking the 10 main albums, but I kind of put them in chunks. Like I take a chunk of 3 albums and say, these are my 3 favorite albums, and another chunk of 3 albums and say, these are my second favorite. And Panic is probably in that first 3.
Yeah, because you just, you pretty much bus-tossed the entire concept of our podcast today, because you were talking about, you had that Michael Jordan meme about, when someone tries to tell me their least favorite MxPx album.
I was afraid you'd think that, because it's so funny when you guys started your podcast.
It's also because our most recent podcast
was one of your least
favorites. We will get to at some point, because if we're talking about our favorite songs, inevitably we're going to come up on, our favorite albums. And they're, as much as I would like to be generous and say every MxPx album has its strong points, and that would just be a lie, because there are albums that I absolutely favor and that are in my bones and in my blood and in my soul, that they are.
No, I totally get it. It's so funny, and I feel bad, and I've actually apologized about this before, but when you guys started and you were a little bit more critical of Coconacha than I felt like I was, like, I know that there's technical issues with that album, but those are the things I love about that album.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that there's too many songs, and there are songs that I like JJ's song. I have that title in my head, but I could not hum that song right now to save my life. Like,
okay.
I don't know.
So our very first episode, we talked about how that album is too long. And I feel totally vindicated, because on Mike's most recent podcast, he said, and I quote, most of our albums are too long. And I was like...
Cosign.
Yeah, he did. And
he was thinking about you guys when he said that.
Of course. When are we not at the forefront of Mike's mind? But it's... And so I think that goes directly to maybe why their new album is only 31 minutes and 11 songs. And it's sweet. It's that sweet spot. And yes, I made that meme of like, please, sir, may I have some more? Because yes, the album was so concise and to the point and tight, and that we're like, oh man, I would have loved another 2 or 3 songs. But then you run the risk of like, maybe the other 2 or 3 songs that were demos that they did record. I mean, he said on his podcast that they had some ballads that they cut.
Right.
I'm so grateful for that.
Oh my God. I'm so glad hearing that they had ballads that they cut. I'm so glad that by all means, release them as digital downloads or B-sides or whatever, fine. But I'm So glad that they're not on that album. But again, I need to bring this up. Speaking of Before Everything and After, so just yesterday on the official MxPx page on Instagram, they posted that video of Mike playing Quit Your Life as a couple got engaged.
Right.
And for those who listened to our Before Everything and After episode, I very much made it clear that that song is my least favorite track in the MxPx discography. I was not shy about that. However, hearing that song, nothing but the acoustic guitar, no other backing vocals, instruments, piano, for Christ's sake, just the guitar, stripped down to its studs, its most bare elements. I have to admit, it's not as bad as I think it is as it is on Before Everything and After.
You backtrack and sell out. Come on. You
No.
hate that.
No, it honestly threw me for a loop when I heard it just being played on acoustic on the street, because before John and I started recording the segment, he hadn't seen the video yet. I played it for him, and then I played the album version, and it's like up an octave on the album. I think
A little too high for him, maybe.
Mike is like playing it, it's like a different key when he's playing it on the street.
Right.
And
it might be just because he's, maybe he sings in a lower key now.
maybe,
Just
Right.
10 years, 15 years later.
But there's no, it's 15 years is a solid chunk of time, but not hearing the piano or the production, this is a weird thing for me to admit, but it struck me in a way. But I think this is also coupled with the backstory that you gave with it. And for maybe those who don't know, why don't you share what you know about the backstory about the meaning of Quit Your Life?
Well, so this, I've shared this. And I just want to say, this wasn't mentioned by Mike in any interview that I've seen, but this is a thing that I've seen in a lot of as I search forums, and I specifically hearing people talk about when they moved back to Waco, right?
Right.
This is something I actually heard coming up a lot. Is that Quit Your Life, sort of the subtext of it is the idea of Holly Herrera marrying Mike and literally quitting her life as it was in Texas and moving to Bremerton with him, which is also a prophecy fulfilled for Move to Bremerton, because he met a special girl who lives somewhere else in the world. Quit Your Life is almost the third act to the Move to Bremerton musical play or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or
if you wanna start off with one ad, Move to Bremerton, Quit Your Life, and then maybe
Calling Sick is a little bit of a continuation, perhaps on a smaller scale.
no, I was gonna say something like Moments might be the
Right.
the end of that whole sequence of songs.
yeah.
But
And
yeah,
the Quit Your Life is just singing about, he's singing about what sounds like, reasonably innocuous things hey, just quit your, call it, call it sick that's a different song. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's saying just stay home today. But really he might have been, it seems very much the possibility that he was really saying, along with Don't Walk Away. Those two songs are kind of
I love that U2 song.
Well, that's the thing, is they might both be, Don't Walk Away is definitely about Holly, because that's what he specifically says in the Fixer Upper episode. And that's, they make that board and they put it up in their new house in Waco with all the lyrics on it and stuff.
Oh, right.
So I think that a lot of that album is specifically about Holly. And so those two songs are sort of about that. And the other thing is we touched on this talking about going to film school. Like I left Massachusetts, I go to Florida, and that's where my wife is from. So, and you guys were talking about one of your last podcasts about when you met your wives. It's like I met my wife in film school in Florida in a school that had like a ratio of like 75 guys to one girl.
Yeah.
Like it was a testosterone school.
That's rough, bro.
I know. And I got and I ended up falling in love with and marrying. It was like completely meant to be, and we're like literally soulmates. And I met her at this school, and then, you know, I basically quit my original life to stay with her. And she's originally from Florida. We moved to New York together to try to break into film, and then we moved all around the country with like other family, trying to get on our feet. Eventually, you know, save up enough money to get to LA. So that's what we did. So like, I'm sort of the Holly in that, in the quit your life situation.
And now you guys are the kings of Hollywood.
Yeah. And Holly got to move back to her family in Waco. So maybe someday when I have enough money, I can have a house in LA and a house back in Boston.
Yes. So do you mind sharing your wife's name? I'm curious.
Oh, Jessica.
Jessica.
And she's kind of known now too. She's, everyone keeps all of my meme fans eventually figure out who she is, and they start following her, and she's like, more of your MxPx people are following me, and I'm going to disappoint them, because she's like more into music now because of me. Like, she had some pop punk and ska bands that she liked, but she didn't follow music as a scene, as a thing at all until she met me. Like, you had some CDs you liked, like she randomly liked the Insiders, and she liked like Simple Plan and Good Charlotte and Relient K and stuff like that. But then it was, you know, and then she met me, and I'm like, no, you can actually follow their tours. You can look online, and you can figure out all the stuff they're working on. And you can find smaller bands that are influenced by them. And so now from the last 10 years of us being together, now she's more into music than ever before. And she finds bands that she tells me about and stuff like that.
That's cool.
So, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So that video was amazing. That marriage proposal, I literally gasped because I didn't know what was happening. I said, I was just like, here's a cute video of Mike busking.
Yeah, right.
And then the guy got down on his knees, and I was like, oh, I had no idea it was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think these last 24 hours with me and that song, like, it's sort of, I think I just need to reevaluate where
Your whole life.
I need to.
Well, to be on your side of it, right? One thing I was going to say was when you guys started podcasting, you were kind of critical of Poconacha in ways that I personally, like, the things you criticize about that album are the things that I think it's great for.
Mm-hmm.
But when you criticized Before Everything and After, I was like, yeah, there you go. Like, there's nothing particular about Before Everything and After that I feel like I need to defend. And
Right.
sometimes I kind of backed myself into a corner of being an MxPx white knight. Like, I don't criticize the band a lot. There are things, I'll just say it, my least favorite album is Secret Weapon, right? Mm-hmm. But like, I'll tell you guys that, I'll say it on the podcast, people can hear it, but I don't make memes about not liking Secret Weapon. Because to me personally, like, people are going to love Secret Weapon. It's going to be their favorite album. And they're going to see my meme where I'm saying Secret Weapon sucks. And there are songs on that album I love, but it's just that, you know, I'm not going to make that fact that I don't like that album a punchline, because it's going to upset people. So my online persona is like that I'm a white knight for them. Like, I don't criticize them just because no one wants to hear a funny MxPx memes account say, you know, what they don't like. I try not to be, So
And for our podcast, where you start off, when we're trying to look at the discography in a measured way, where we're not trying to put on rose-colored glasses and just say every song is great, and because of course, like, Mike wouldn't say that,
right? And he doesn't,
and he like, doesn't.
Every album, his favorite album always seems to be the most recent one.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
But you know, we're trying to be honest that even if I said this on the Before Everything and After episode, that if you look at the 10 albums, the 10 proper full-length albums that they put out, for me, like, even if you, like, if I say Before Everything After is a dud, that's still 9 out of 10 albums that you think like these are, you can make arguments for this being a solid album. And I think even if you make an argument that Secret Weapon isn't super strong, even there aren't many bands that have that kind of a discography where you can say that this album is solid. This album is just as solid. Because I can make that argument for most MxPx albums.
Right.
And which is the case for Panic. I think this is an exceptionally strong record. And coming off Before Everything and After, it's such a sigh of relief to but I want to get into some of your songs. Like what songs, what are your top 3 on this album? And I know it's it's for me this is
hard.
difficult. It's hard for this album, but
it's easy. It's crazy because it's like this. It's easier even for like Life in General and Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo are like perfect albums, but I can kind of easily pick 3 songs from that, and I don't know. It's like, but it's really, oh man, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the back of the CD right now, trying to figure it out, and I'm not trying to fanboy out, and I'm like, oh, I can't do it, but I could do it. So I guess I'll just say like one thing as I'm trying to work towards what my 3 favorite songs are. One thing that I love about this album is that the first 3 songs on Panic are all, in and of themselves, great album openers.
yes.
Darkest Places, Young and Depressed, Heard That Sound. They all could have opened this album.
Well,
it's kind of amazing, in my opinion.
So can I say that, and this is, the Darkest Places starts off with some bitchin' drums, and which again, to go back to not continue to harp on Before Everything and After, the beginning of that album just is a throwaway, and this album starts off with rad sounding drums and then into the guitar, and it sounds rad.
And the slide.
The pick
Like,
slide.
we're here.
So
Yes,
good.
it's so good. And they're into the chorus like by 30 seconds. And, none of this.
It's a little bit of... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just going from Before Everything and After to this. It's like, yes, a 2-minute, 35-second song. It's great. It's a return to form for an album opener. And John and I both had Play It Loud on our top 3 for Before Everything and After. And if the album started that way, it would have been awesome, because it just messes up the flow of the MxPx discography of album openers. But I love this return to form.
And it's got a little bit of that. It's got some low-key social justice that you guys love so much.
Oh yeah,
SJW's over here.
It's not lost on me that this album returns to that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. This album is also like... So I was analyzing this album a little bit today, and I swear I'll tell you what my 3 favorite songs are. But I was analyzing this album a little bit today, and I was thinking about this in terms of like, there's sort of a trilogy in my mind. There's a narrative that starts with Before Everything and After and ends with Secret Weapon, and it's the mainstreaming, or like the mass marketing of MxPx, which I don't think if you talk about that with other bands, it sounds like a negative. But basically, like, they get signed to A&M, they have Life in General reissued, and then they make Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo, and they make Every Passing Moment. But those are undeniably just MxPx albums. Like, the producers on those albums sort of shaped MxPx were there to help them. It feels to me shape them into their next steps. But Before Everything and After, Panic and Secret Weapon feel to me like they're sort of more like there was someone behind the band, maybe alongside the band, maybe behind them, maybe in front of them telling them what they have to do. I don't know the actual literal story behind them, but when I hear those 3 albums, it sounds like, let's take MxPx, which exists now, and let's make them more appealing for everybody. Let's like get them the largest audience possible.
Right.
And sometimes like the largest audience possible, sometimes that means selling your artistic soul and doing stuff you don't want to do. I think MxPx for the most part is like they couldn't really do that. You know what I mean? Like they had to still be MxPx. And I think they probably worked with people who maybe understood that, maybe they didn't. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But before everything and after, particularly, like it's got those ballads, it's got that production that just kind of feels like we're gonna make this album the biggest pop punk album of 2003, and then Panic being on One Side Dummy, not a major, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they were trying to, and I think Joe Sib, I remember him on Mike Herrera's podcast talking about how they more or less had the album like done. Like, I don't know how done. I don't know if it was just past demoed or just like planned or whatever. But they're like, hey, Joe, here's the album that we want you to put out on One Side Dummy. And Joe heard it and he's like, it's not done. And then and they were actually upset at first, but then they realized, no, he's right. So like Joe kind of pushed them, and Joe being a real punk guy, like boots on the ground, like touring and being in bands, like I think and having his finger on the pulse, like just, his label released like the Warped Tour albums and stuff, so he kind of knows what bands are popular, with kids and stuff. So it's like he pushes this album to be everything it could be to, the 2005 skate punk world. And I think they did it exactly as well as they could have hoped for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Secret Weapon then takes a different step where they kind of go back to Tooth and Nail, and it's sort of like their last step at sort of that Tooth and Nail Christian bookstore world. Like, I don't completely understand. I've heard little bits and pieces of them talking about that, but it's like, they get their publishing back with going to Tooth and Nail, so like, why would they not? But it's like, not all their publishing, but a bunch of their publishing. So it's like they put out Secret Weapon, and it has also a certain shimmer on it of like being very particularly produced to be like the most mass market possible, but it's also a sort of a different thing, and for me it doesn't work. I love You're on Fire and a couple other songs, but yeah, that's the and I just kind of ran out of steam, but that's the idea I have with these 3 albums. It's
Sure.
like everything else is pure MxPx, and these albums are MxPx plus producer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I absolutely get that, especially when you look at the production credits on those particular albums. But so circling back, if you were to throw out a top 3,
I'm not gonna. I'll do it.
it doesn't need, because
it doesn't need to be in order.
No order.
Probably. So okay, I'm looking. So I'm definitely gonna say Young and Depressed.
Okay.
Right. So because like I said, those first three songs, like Young and Depressed, could have been the first song. I love it almost as equally as Darkest Places, but Darkest Places is gonna have to fall off in this case. Then I'm gonna say Gray Skies Turn Blue.
Okay.
Because I don't know. Is there something about the keyboard and wait, is the keyboard in this version, or is the keyboard in
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
It is, okay, yeah. I was
Because
getting
it also kind of feels like a recycled version of the opposite from the Renaissance
Yes.
EP.
And I kind of like that because you guys love Renaissance, right?
I love Renaissance.
I like it, but I don't love it.
I think I'm with you. I think I'd say I like it, don't love it.
I love it.
And
I really wish they continued with that sound from Ever Passing Moment to Before Everything and After.
Yeah.
So
I don't
so
know.
we
it
got
just didn't hit me. Oh, sorry.
Young and
got
Depressed.
Gray Skies Turn Blue.
Gray Skies Turn Blue.
And then, I mean, maybe Wrecking Hotel Rooms.
Okay.
But maybe. But then I'm also thinking, because it doesn't exactly sound like a MxPx song, but it sort of sounds like an MxPx song. I really like Waiting for the World to End.
Okay.
It almost sounds like an Arthur MxPx hybrid.
Yeah, we're getting putting that post out asking for people's feedback about what they think. We're getting a lot of Arthur comments for this album.
I think because like they put out that Arthur EP a couple of years before, but then Arthur kind of went away, and eventually they bring it back with the full length. And there's also like which one is it? Is it which one sounds like a proto Tumbledown on here?
Late Again.
Notes.
Yeah.
Late Again, that's right. Yeah, so it's like it's almost like the side projects were kind of like I don't even know if Tumbledown existed yet, even as an idea in his head.
I think Tumbledown came in 2008.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's almost like maybe that's why Tumbledown was created, because maybe he was writing more of these sort of country inspired songs. And you can
But it's not even that. It's not even that country. I mean, it has a little bit of a twinge, but like,
yeah.
I mean, I would argue that Kings of Hollywood,
Right. I was going to say that.
I mean, is more pop country than Late Again is.
Yeah.
I mean, Late Again, like, it could almost be reworked into like almost like a Rancid song, or it has that sort of like street punk.
It's got the like barroom vocals at the end there.
Yeah. So, all right, awesome.
So that's my list then. Young and Depressed, Gray Skies Turn Blue, Waiting for the World to End. But that's a tough list for me to figure out.
No, this is honestly, if you will, honestly one of the first MxPx albums, probably since Slowly, that I had a challenge picking a top 3.
Cool. Well, do you have closing Panic-related thoughts, or closing thoughts of any kind?
We've already spoken so long, but I had written notes on like every song, and and now about 45 minutes into this discussion, I was like, we're probably not getting to my notes on individual songs.
I mean, 45 plus our previous, maybe 30.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, this is the nature of being doing an MxPx podcast and getting into the weeds, because you can talk at length.
And I don't have a lot of real MxPx friends, right? Like all my MxPx discussions happen in text.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So if you get me audio-wise talking about MxPx, I probably won't stop talking about them, because I have so many things to say, and especially now that I have been like over-analyzing songs and over-analyzing periods of the band and stuff. It's like I have all these thoughts in my head. My wife was like, why don't you start an MxPx podcast? And I'm like, I guess, but now there's 2.
Why not a third?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's, this is the whole thing. Like, just do collabs. We can all work together. We can all work. You reposted one of my MxPx memes the other day, and so we can all just be a part of the community, like all have ownership over things, and just work together to create some content, because that's what it's all about.
As curators of additional MxPx content, we must band together and collaborate in new and exciting ways. Yeah,
up until recently, there hasn't been a lot of MxPx related additional content.
Exactly.
Not a lot of MxPx content.
Daniel, we really appreciate all of the time.
Yeah, man.
No problem. Sorry I rambled on.
No, it's great.
Hey,
that's
dude,
what we do.
Dude, do you listen to the podcast?
We ramble.
That's the other thing, is you guys got to be the comprehensive
encyclopedic. That's right.
Encyclopedic compendium.
We almost know all 3 of their names now, so we're getting close.
Yeah, we have Mark.
Travis.
Yeah, Travis.
and
Yanni.
Yeah. Mark, Travis, and Yanni.
Pretty sure that's right.
So of MxPx. My favorite band.
If people do not follow MxPx memes on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, do it now. Very funny stuff.
Yes.
And also check out my Oh, so you did say YouTube. I was also check out my YouTube. Which
I remember.
Yeah, you need to stop getting those DMCA's, bro.
I know that's the thing is it's UMD, which I can't. What can I can't really do anything. My Everything Sucks sped up video got blocked worldwide. And I'm like, okay.
How is that even possible? It's so. It's clearly
a transformative element.
Of course it is.
And the thing is, like, my Take on Me video was also strangely my Take on Me, where I just put the MxPx version of Take on Me under the visuals of the actual video.
Right.
That didn't get blocked for the MxPx song. That got blocked originally by, I think it was also Universal, just for the visuals of the Take on Me video. Like, they matched the visuals of the Take on Me video, not the music, and said this video is blocked worldwide. I contested that one and on fair use grounds, and I won that one. I think that's kind of clear because I'm not using both the video, audio and the video of the original element. Like, I'm clearly transforming into something completely new. Right. Whereas Everything Sucks, it's literally the video. Just sped up.
Yes, but it's also, I mean, gosh, it's priceless. It's so good. And I for one am glad that I was able to experience that. Because there is a song on Panic that I think it was Cold Streets. I think it was Cold Streets that it was another one of those You songs, I think it was that one that I thought, oh man, this would be another one of those really funny sped up videos, but I don't think they have a music video for.
Video too. You know how I got the idea for the Everything Sucks thing was someone did. I mean, I just copied someone else's idea. It was they took Basket Case by Green Day and they sped up every time Billy Joe said it referenced himself. So I guess if you look at the lyrics of Basket Case, he talks about himself, and so every time he said it, it's sped up. And then I was like, I want to do that, but so I wish I could tell you it was my idea, but it existed already with like B Movie, where every time they say B, it speeds up 5%, and eventually the movie's incomprehensible. Like that's the original version of that.
That's a genius idea.
Yeah, and then I realized that Christian bookstores were saying, hey, MxPx is the Christian version of Green Day. It's more like MxPx is the selfless version of Green Day because Green Day's singing about themselves, but MxPx, he's singing about you. He's concerned with you being here.
That's deep, man.
Yeah.
And that's
my closing.
A perfect note to end. Thanks so much, Daniel, for taking
Leary,
the time.
MxPx memes. Thank you so much, and we will
see you out in the content.
See you in that content sphere.
All right, I'm gonna go walk my dog. She's been staring at me this whole time.
See you, man.
All right, man. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
So many problems, no one else but you can solve them. Where did the time go? Everybody wants to know. Life goes on day after day after day. Too much work and no play. When life seems like it can't get harder. When you feel like a martyr.